improved.
It is. Dr. Rob. So
Yo,
glad to see you
Tammy.
tonight. So I got to tell everybody, I got to start off with this. We got notification today that Dr. Rob's Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast series is number one. I can only hold up one finger, not two. One in the U.S. Way to go, Dr. Rob. And we have
under the category. Under the category of sex. It's not number one.
Yes.
Trust me.
There you go.
I'm sure that something is bigger. But
Yeah.
in terms of human sexuality, we hit number one today. And that's pretty good because I know a lot of famous people. And I hope we're reaching people. I think we're making a difference. That's what I really love about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there's a new podcast series that will launch probably in the next 2 weeks, I hope at the latest.
We say, okay, how many people are here? Let me see. There's 56. Okay, so we are not, okay, I just want you all to know we are not selling anything because podcasts are free. But Tammy, how do you want to describe this just before we start the show today? How would, or as we are starting the show, how would you describe this particular thing we've done?
The new podcast series?
Yes.
It's all conversations and question answering. So it will be taken from, in an anonymous manner, taken from the webinars and information that we are asked. But Dr. Rob, you answer questions like, I think it was last week when you're talking about the difference between love addiction and sex addiction, and having that out there so that people can find that information, I think is going to be really helpful.
So this is called the Rob and Tammy Show, basically. Not really. It's going to be called
Betrayal and I can't remember. And addiction.
Anyway, we don't know the name of our own show. And I would share something if I could share my screen, but I can't share my screen.
I will see if I can find it and share it later. But
okay,
we've got questions. But anyway, we're excited. You finish your conversation about that.
Well, it's you and I have been sitting here and talking and doing this for a year and a half, and to have some of the sort of best moments cut out and put out there for people listening to podcasts, I'm really excited about. And so, yeah, if Tammy should send out the podcast cover, that's what you really should do.
I will see if I can find it.
All right, but in any case, we should answer questions and be here what people are really here for.
So asking questions already. Okay. Have you heard of a chemsex addiction, including Adderall abuse and prostitutes? His addiction eventually escalated to meth. This is, you can answer this, but this is also a great Dr. David question. He's like, that's completely up his alley.
Well, can you say where and when they could catch that, just to say it so that it's...
certainly. So Dr. David Fawcett does his a webinar on this platform on Wednesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time. He also has a chemsex group, a 12-step group in the rooms on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific time for those who identify as having a co-occurring chemical dependency and sex addiction. That's a specific group for them. But Dr. David, he's an encyclopedia of chemicals,
of drug problems. And that is why he and I really teamed up to work together, because we understand, and I really believe this, that if people have co-occurring drug and sex problems, you can't just go to a drug treatment center, because you will get treated for drugs, but then how do you deal with all of the issues underneath, especially if they're shameful and uncomfortable? So we have tried to focus this stuff so we can really talk about it. So wait, let's get to that question.
So the question is, have you heard of chemsex addiction, including Adderall abuse and prostitutes? His addiction eventually escalated to meth. That was the tag on it.
I can say a couple of things about it. I mean, I assume someone who is prescribed Adderall, that's a drug for attention deficit disorder. So to a certain point, that might have been really helpful for them. But Adderall, there are many drugs for, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to claim to be a physician, but I do know a few things, and I can, check this information out with your doc. But there are a couple of drugs for ADD or ADHD that no longer are abusable. And you need the right psychiatrist and the right, so if this person has ADD, they would need a prescription other than Adderall if they're abusing Adderall, because there are drugs to help that condition that don't feel like Adderall. Adderall feels like speed. And if you're an addict, you just want more. And I don't mean coffee, I mean more like amphetamines. And so I think actually Adderall is some kind of pseudoamphetamine. So basically they were already taking meth if they were abusing the Adderall before they even got to the meth. And then it was like, oh, meth is even better, like 100 times more better. So they were already headed in that direction. And also people who want to obliterate themselves in that particular way around sexual behavior often have a tremendous amount of shame and self-hatred around sex. But when they do a stimulant, when they engage in the use of a stimulant, they feel good about themselves because stimulants make you feel great for a short period of time, and they feel excited about the sex they're having. So sometimes people who have long-term self-hatred and disappointment with themselves sexually or romantically can use the meth, and then they feel powerful and fantastic and amazing until they run out of meth. And so it goes. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. And again, I invite you to click into Dr. David's webinar as well. So some of you may be new to this platform. If you are, welcome. Welcome to all of you. But I'm sharing the questions that are in the Q&A with Dr. Rob. So those are where I go first. I see a few people are putting a few things in chat, but it's way more efficient for us to deal with them in the Q&A. So
also,
Dr. Rob, go ahead.
In the chat, if you want to, you saw a book title you liked, or you heard a music you liked or something, you can share it with everybody. That's good for the chat. But questions for us really have to be, and by the way, Tammy will filter the questions, so she won't say your name, or sometimes even if you're a man or a woman, these answers are meant to be generalizable. I don't know you, I can't see you, I don't know your life, but we're giving general answers. I think the ones we would want to hear for these kinds of questions anyway.
So I think this next one, I think you said a statement along the lines of this in the room. So this person is asking, can you explain this statement? The more we let go, the stronger our boundaries.
When I am trying to control a situation, I am focused on that or them. So boundaries don't really matter because it's not about what I need or what I want or what make me feel safe. I'm more focused on others and trying to figure them out and what they can do. So I think boundaries show up when you're really focusing on yourself and what you need and what you want, rather than what make them feel good, or how you punish them, or how you get attention from them. Or I think boundaries are much more about being with what makes me feel good and really sticking with that.
Well, and not even what makes me feel good, but what helps you have safety. We talk a lot about boundaries being, providing safety for us in a situation. So we feel good, but it provides that safety.
Right.
Okay, so next question. My husband, the addict, and I, the betrayed, are working recovery, and he is wanting to be brutally honest. This comes across as being critical of me. What is the difference between honesty and criticism?
So I'm not sure. What do you think do you think this is related to the issues around addiction or porn or whatever, or do you think this is more related just to their marriage?
I feel like this is related to the marriage, because if it's feeling like criticism, it's not like I need to share this with you from a disclosure standpoint. It feels like I need to be brutally honest with you and you're whatever.
So I wrote a book about this for men who've cheated, and it isn't even just for men who are addicts or look at porn. It's for men who've cheated at all, because I think that men have a really hard time figuring out how to resolve that. And the book is called Out of the Doghouse, and the reason I named it Out of the Doghouse is I think that men don't understand when they've cheated on a woman how long they really need to sit out in that yard, in that doghouse. In other words, how long they need to show humility and grace and appreciation that person didn't leave, period. So if you're feeling that your spouse is being critical when he's the one who's broken your heart, and it's been less than a year, I would wonder how he perceives healing things with you, because he's pushing you away, and that wouldn't make me trust or feel any more comfortable. In fact, someone is criticizing me, I'd wonder what's going on with them, that they're pushing me away when I'm the one who got hurt. So Tammy, do you have a thought about this?
No, I agree. And I just typed into the chat, all panelists and all attendees, the Out of the Doghouse book, but it really is a good primer, I think, for practical tools to help work on rebuilding trust. And coming for me as an addict, I will talk from my personal, it's really easy to point things out because then I'm not looking at me, I'm externalizing the problems and whatever. But the hard work of recovery is about dealing with the stuff that's me. So the acting out, the behavior stuff is the symptom. It's really dealing with the underlying issues. And it feels like, and I'm only reading 2 sentences, but it feels to me like it's like going, it's still pointing outward rather than reflecting back in. So next question. I'm in early recovery, glad you're here, and learning about childhood emotional neglect. I find it difficult to interact with my parents without being overwhelmed with resentment and anger. I don't want to blame them for the neglect since it seems like they themselves experienced the same thing in their childhoods. They both had their own addictions but are not in recovery. How do I maintain a healthy relationship with them while processing a loss of childhood innocence? That's a great question.
Well, I have to say I've experienced this because I had a mentally ill mother who was very abusive to me in various ways. I mean, she was crazy. It wasn't her fault. She was out of control. She was on the way to the hospital or coming back from the hospital. But the things she said to me, the way she acted, what I saw was horrifying. And, I think that will be with me for the rest of my life. And so a couple of things for you. First of all, it took me a while where I needed to be away from her to focus on my feelings. And I do love my mother, and we did install that connection with each other. But on the other hand, while I was working on this, I just couldn't casually see her, or, I could send a birthday card, I could go to visit at Thanksgiving, but stay at a hotel. But I couldn't have a lot of constant connection and contact because I just needed some time to work through this. And then I think, to be honest, for me, it was an evaluation of who is this person to me now, not who were they then. And so I was over time able to see my mom, even though she hurt me, even though she was broken, as just this broken lady now who actually needed my help. And so it was kind of great but I had to put down all the needs that I ever might have of her as a kid. And I had to work through that in therapy before I could look at her and say, okay, this is just a broken person who I love and I'm connected to, and not be resentful. Because the resentment comes up when I haven't worked through my own issues. And you know what? Your adult parents, they may or may not deserve that resentment from you. They're certainly not going to understand it. And there's one more thing I do want to say. I love this statement, Tammy. I talk about certain things in therapy, you just want to write these down. So I had a therapist I was sitting in group therapy once, and a person in group had been really horribly abused by someone. And they were really in this dilemma because they felt they needed to forgive that person. And they sat in group and they said, this person really treated me badly, but I want to forgive them. I don't want to live with this. I don't want them to live with this. And their abuse was so horrible. I thought this was a beautiful thing. The therapist said, I really do think that person deserves forgiveness, and I hope they find it and they seek it. But I'm not sure you're the one who needs to or might ever be able to give it, because you have to deal and be with where you are. And that doesn't necessarily mean, ending it there. And I really love that because it allowed me for a long time to be angry and hurt, but not feel like I was aiming an arrow at someone. And I think that can really work with parents too. Tammy, do you have thoughts about this?
Well, I do.
Or spouses?
Yeah, I mean, because it is so complicated, and but I was thinking, not forcing the relationship, taking some space, we talked about boundaries a little bit ago. I think that you'll find that this is how I can interact with them, and this is how I can't, and being okay with, Dr. Rob said, I needed to take some space. Great. That's what you need to do for you, for your recovery, which needs to be, I'm so glad you're here, early recovery. But what you need to focus on, in my opinion, as someone in recovery, is recovery, and what's going to help you be safe and be able to move forward in that. And constantly churning up, the negative and those resentments is difficult and makes focusing on the recovery more challenging. So give yourself grace and space, and you're doing the best you can. You're right. They are broken, and but you are working on recovery, and that you stand a you can change this. You don't have to keep perpetuating it, next generation. So,
and you know what? It may also be, just really quickly, a little therapy comment here. Sometimes we project onto people, our own fears, and maybe they're not the ones who you're worried about feeling neglected. Maybe it's you who are feeling like, what if I'm not getting anything back, or, because they may be perfectly fine with your being distant and unavailable, and they may not even notice, who knows? But I'm curious, just as a therapist, about your need to worry about how they're going to feel. And, it's just like not your problem. Anyway, go ahead, Tammy.
Okay. No, I 100%. Your deal is you and your recovery. Next question, Dr. Rob. Hi, Dr. Rob and Tammy. My question is, how do I stop taking people, meaning wife, family, and friends, for granted? What are some ways I can work on this?
Do you want to, so this is a really big question.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is like one we could take the whole rest of the hour with. So, I think.
So go ahead, Tam, why don't you start?
Well, I was just thinking, addiction is all about me. And so, I think learning in recovery to pay attention to other people, to actually ask them, how are you doing, to genuinely care, and not be following up with, here's what I did. I mean, I think it's learning to be intentional, and learning to try to connect with them where they're at, not where I'm at. What do you think?
I forgot the question.
The question was, how do I stop taking people, meaning wife and family, for granted?
I know, I'm kidding you though. That was a joke. So I know, I would think for yourself, what makes me feel like I'm cared about, and that someone really has an interest in me, because I know people in my life who've really made me feel special and important. And I can think back to the things they did with me. They took me someplace, they were really curious, they brought me something. So I think just paying attention, I think there's a little construction going on somewhere, paying attention to what means something to someone else, and learning, like, oh, you had a bad day today. Tell me all about that. I want to learn all about that. Not because you can't wait to talk about your day, but because you really, really are curious. And by the way, this is how you learn. This is how you teach children that they are loved, is you constantly engage them on their level with what they need and what they want. And you just keep showing up for them. And it's not that different in adult life. It's just a little more mature way of doing it.
Okay, next question. Husband has been an SA for 35 years of marriage, discovered 3 years ago. Formal disclosure was 2 years ago. He won't be transparent with his recovery, saying it's his boundary, and me asking is not respecting his boundary. He's in SLAA and sees a therapist who husband said is, so the husband is saying that the therapist is saying that the wife is codependent, and I'm not working my recovery when I ask, feel re-victimized and hopeless. My husband refused to read your book or go to couples recovery. This is not building any trust or safety. It feels controlling and manipulative. I only asked for a sobriety date if a filter is on his phone, laptop, and basic recovery plan. His behaviors feel abusive, and I continue to feel unsafe and anxious. Dr. Rob, what healthy, active recovery behaviors am I to look for, and what acceptable things a wife should ask for? Also, some suggested boundaries for me to set. I feel as if he cannot be transparent. I do not want him to hug or even touch me. So that was a lot, but she's.
But actually, I'm looking at this question,
okay,
so I think I can, because I was like, oh, I better look at this one too.
Okay.
So, we don't know what this person discovered 3 years ago. So we don't know actually whether the person was looking at porn, whether they were acting out with other people, affairs, 5 years, forever. And he won't, apparently the spouse, the addict doesn't want to say to you, this is what I've committed to, this is what I'm changing, this is where I'm going for help. He wants to keep it a secret. So let's start there. If I have harmed you as a spouse, I am one down, again, in the doghouse. So if I want to earn your trust back, it's my responsibility to be transparent, to be honest, to show up for the things I'm going to show up for. I think you have this a little backwards, because it's your spouse's job to try desperately to want to keep you. And if he's not doing that, I would wonder where my car keys are and how quickly I can get out of there. So two things I wrote down when I was listening to you. One, addicts lie. Addicts lie. I can't tell you how many guys have been in groups saying, oh, my wife is so awful and she's so terrible and she does this, she does that. I'm like, wow. And then I meet her and she's lovely because he's so angry. He's just saying this and that, but he's not really giving me an accurate picture. So in a mood, wanting to shove you away, I can imagine your spouse might say, well, you're just this and that. And that's what my therapist and I agree on. That is abusive also, because it's like saying me and the professional agree that you're the bad one. That's an awful thing to say to you. The second thing I wrote down is trust your gut, trust your feelings. These are your words. You are being controlled. You are being manipulated. You are, there's another word up here. You're not safe. And how could you possibly feel that way? So to me, you're living with someone who not only doesn't want to work on this, but is actively doing things to keep it from being brought up. And it's your job to keep yourself safe. If this topic isn't right on top of the agenda all the time, how are you ever going to feel safe? So everything you say is right. My concern and question, which I'm going to toss to Tammy, is what are you going to do about it? What do you do in this kind of situation?
And it is a bit, because not everybody is willing or able to leave. We are getting the phone calls of the people that are going, you need to go to treatment now because you clearly aren't. I will caution because it's like you are saying, he says that the therapist says. I would absolutely ask for a meeting with the therapist.
Couples.
Yes. And say, I need to understand what you are saying to him because, he lies. And so yeah, the lack of transparency, you are not safe. You have nothing. He has not done anything to rebuild trust. So, your choices are, how can you create safe boundaries within this?
Right. And I just say, she further just said, he refuses to meet with my therapist. So what all of this behavior tells me, just to say it, is that he either has some tremendous secrets that he doesn't want you to know, or he's still doing something he doesn't want you to know about. This defense, or he's just really a very troubled guy. I would absolutely encourage you to read Prodependence. It's a book about, the right choices you may have made in the relationship and how that might, a different way of looking at it when he throws codependency at you. So I will say this, as I always do when there are a bunch of spouses here, and I hope that you are, and for the addicts too. There is, if Tammy were my spouse and she were driving me crazy and she got fat as a house and she wouldn't have sex with me and she wouldn't make breakfast anymore, I could say, wow, Tammy, because you're so awful to me, I deserve to get breakfast somewhere else. I deserve to maybe go car shopping and buy myself a new car. I'm going to get a divorce. There are a lot of things I could do in an unhappy relationship than go fool around, make my spouse, so I think this is something he wants to be doing and he doesn't want to keep talking about it. And you're bugging him because you're making him look at something he doesn't want to look at. I would be looking for where else I can stay. I mean, seriously, I am worried about your emotional safety. I don't know if this man has hit you, but he hits you emotionally and you've put it out right here. And I'm concerned for you. Tammy, there's a group she could join during the day to talk to some women at no cost. Would you mention that for her?
Yes, there's multiple. One is the Old Lady Posse, and they named it, but it's for women of a certain age who have been with their partners a longer time.
More than 20 years.
Probably. That is, I just don't qualify it. So if somebody feels like they fit the Old Lady Posse, join, as long as you're a woman. That one meets Tuesday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then there's the Betrayed Partner group on Wednesdays at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. And then there was one last night. There was another great group, very active group. So there's some great partner support.
And this is on Sex and Relationship Healing.
All of this is on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Okay. I wanted to say one more thing. Dr. Rob does a case consult for professionals. And this kind of topic has come up before where the therapists go, the guys aren't being honest with their wives and they aren't staying in recovery. They're kind of in this awkward space and they're kind of pretending because they go, well, I'm seeing my therapist and I'm doing all this. And Dr. Rob has gone so far as to say, that's kind of colluding with them against their partner. That isn't providing safety for the partner. So I agree, get get safety for you, do what you need to do to take care of yourself, and there is support.
And get support from other women, because they
Yes.
will be able to guide you better than either Tammy or I can.
Yes, absolutely. So the next one, I'm learning that it is common for an addict to develop a parent-child relationship with their partners. Could you talk a little bit about this? Other than addicts stepping up to their responsibilities, are there ways to change, improve this dynamic?
Well, I think that, well, this is a heavy one for me, because I do think that until we get a little bit into recovery, not even just at the beginning, that we do turn our spouses into whatever we didn't get as kids. You know, my first relationship that was serious, I absolutely believe that we parented each other. I was dad, she was mom, and she didn't have a dad, I didn't have a mom. So we were perfect for years and years. I think we replaced or filled in parts of each other, if that makes sense. And so, you know, in that way it was fairly good, because it was mutual parenting, and that is not a bad thing as long as the couple can grow, you know, mutually. But I think that far too many spouses I've talked to, especially female spouses, will say, you know, I've got 2 kids at home, but really I feel like I've got 3. Or if they're coming into treatment, because, you know, we're doing treatment and people show up, and the spouse will call and they say, I'm so glad this person's gone. It's like, oh, I feel like there's one less person to take care of. And what Tammy will tell you, and she says it a lot, is when people come back, I think they often understand what their sense of responsibility is in the home, because part of the important thing about doing treatment in a small setting with just a few people is that we are a family. And I always think this is what treatment should be. Even in large institutions, I think it's better to have small groups, because, you know, the guys have to live with each other. They have to, you know, if they don't brush their teeth, if they don't get in time for breakfast, if they're, you know, the other guys in the house are going to say, wait a minute. And then, of course, because you're in treatment and in a treatment house, all of that gets talked about. So I have taught many a man how to be a good husband by living with other men and just treating them with respect, not men they're being sexual with, but men they're learning and growing from. And believe me, a guy will step up and say, dude, I did the dishes yesterday. How come? Now, I don't think we actually do I think we have a chef and we don't do our own dishes. But nonetheless, look, here's a good thing I want to tell you about treatment, whether it's therapy or treatment centers, is that whatever the client does with me, they're probably doing with you. And I have lots of people who act like your spouse does. And, you know, that's good for them to shift their dependency to us. We're glad for them to be dependent on us. But you don't want to be a mother to a husband. You want to be a wife and a partner. And
they can learn. So.
And we can learn.
Yes.
But I'd still rather my husband cook dinner.
Yeah.
He's better at it.
So is mine. So thank God. Otherwise we'd starve. So, okay. 22 months from D-Day. Treatment includes Red Dog House, one therapy session. Okay. You can see where I'm going with that.
Keep reading.
I'm trying. Couple drop-in group sessions, watch some videos. Addict says no porn or acting out, but all other behavior the same, blaming, lying whenever he wants. Most recent behavior accusing me of cheating, which has never happened. Every time I try to connect and discuss my feelings or our issues, he gets angry and blames me for never going to get over it.
Would you like to start?
Yes. Remember what Dr. Rob said a little bit ago to the other partner who was thinking that things are not safe and not trustworthy? Same thing. What are you going to do to create safety for you? And just like I said a few minutes ago too, the outward blaming and everything else, I'm sorry, but no one gets fixed in one therapy session. When people come to Seeking Integrity treatment program, I tell the partners, I tell them, you aren't going to get fixed in 14 days, but you're going to have a solid foundation on which to build. So I want to say this is BS, and you are not, this has gotten, like Dr. Rob just said, this has got nothing to do with you. If, you know, he has other choices, blaming you, you're not responsible. I put prodependence, moving beyond codependency in the chat to take a look at that book. But this is, you've been traumatized, but it's his addiction, it's his issue.
This is what I don't understand. And Tammy, we've talked about this before, and I don't mean to be devaluing in any way, but I don't understand why women put up with this. I don't see men, I have never seen a man, honestly, who would put up with this. And he lies, he cheats, he's defensive, I understand now what Tammy's saying is true. As long as he's towing the line, doing lots of therapy, going to groups, and being a fairly decent spouse, you probably won't be able to expect empathy and compassion for a while, because he probably doesn't even have it for himself. But there is a walking the line stuff in the beginning, which is, not being defensive, listening to what you have to say, understanding the pain you're in, being willing to show you his program if you want. He can't tell you what someone else did in a 12-step meeting, but he can certainly show you his plan. I've heard men say to me, oh, well, that's private, my sex plan. I'm like, bull dinky, because if you want your spouse to trust you, then she or he has to see what you're being held accountable to. And if it's not everything they would agree with, then they're not going to trust you. And the goal here is not to see what you can get away with and still fit in. The goal is to rebuild a relationship. So anyway, I hear you and I feel sad for you, but I wonder, how safe you are if you're willing to take this and then look for something from him rather than digging deeper for yourself, because you're not safe.
And read out of the doghouse. I say this all the time. Reading a book is great, but if you don't follow anything that's in the book, if you just read it, it doesn't matter. It's like going to 12-step. You can go to 12-step, and well, you used to be able to go to 12-step, but you can go sit in a meeting and warm a chair and
online.
Not really, yeah, but same thing. You can join online, and I've gone to my 12-step meeting, but if I'm not actively implementing the information that I'm learning, I just warmed a chair. That's it. So, I got a little stuff around that. Okay, so the next one. I am 2 weeks sober. Yay. My partner, understandably, is disgusted by what I have done, and she tells me daily. I feel ashamed and discouraged. Any advice?
Well, I have some thoughts, but maybe you could start with some resources. Maybe, because what I would be thinking about is, especially if you're living together right now, how are you getting support separate from her? Here's the deal. Like, when couples are in crisis, it's very difficult for either one of you, because you're used to turning to the other. I mean, when I'm in trouble, the first thing I do is go to my spouse, and vice versa. Here's a time where your spouse is the person who hurt you. So, and you don't trust them. And so you going to them, or them feeling how they feel going to you, or some of the things they would go to you for, they can't because they're secrets or whatever. I think it's a very difficult road. And you hear Tammy and I talk a lot about reaching out and getting support. And look, if I was a betrayed spouse, the last thing I would want to do is get online with a bunch of other women or men who've been cheated on. Like, I don't want to get online with those losers, or whatever it is. Believe me, I would be in that place. But you have to understand that you can't turn to him anymore, not for a long time. And where are you going to get your support? Who's going to be there for you if he can't? And even if he could, even if he showed up and was warm and loving and sweet, you wouldn't trust it. You would wonder what's going on. So you need trustworthy, supportive people in your life that you can talk to. And let me say to everybody, that may not be your mom. That may not be your sister. It may not, and certainly isn't your kids. Because remember, you've got to face this, your family across the Thanksgiving table 5 years from now. You may not want to tell your mom that your husband was doing this, that, or the other thing, because she's never going to forget it. So, and by the way, in this way, I think it's very hard for spouses to get help. Is that your dog, Tammy?
That was my dog. Yeah,
oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
That's Bosley. Okay. I think in 2020, it's not that difficult for a man or a woman to talk to their doctor or their clergy or a friend and say, my husband or wife is drinking too much, or they've using those Vicodin pills and I'm worried. I think these days we all come together around that and we kind of understand that. It's embarrassing, but you cannot necessarily go to everybody and say, well, my spouse is masturbating to this. And look, they're just going to want you to leave the room. Or they're going to take the information. It's going to be very difficult later. So one of the reasons we set up all these support groups is we understand that spouses are often stymied about who to talk to. And that's why you have each other. So I would really encourage making that move and not looking to him to feel better, because he won't make you feel better. Even if he tried, you wouldn't take it in.
So the next one is, how do I move on from shame due to my choices and behavior?
Mm-hmm. That was it?
Yes. We have a lot. I'm going to have to skim
Okay.
through
No,
it.
that was such a short question.
Yes.
So,
how do I move on from shame due to my choices and behavior?
Okay. So I think that all the shame experts have a pretty common belief about this. I've listened to them since the 80s and I'm listening to them now. So the message is always the same. whether it's John Bradshaw or Brene Brown, the message is the same, which is this: if you see yourself as a piece of crap who's ruined everybody's lives and you're a terrible person, and you should be punished, and bad on you if you treat yourself like a bad child, then you're going to be in shame. And the problem with that is there's no there's no growth there. Where are you going to grow from? I'm a horrible person. Where are you going to grow from? Nobody would love me after what I've done. So that place of shame is almost a useless place, because all you are doing is ruminating about how horrible you are. And I'll go one further and give you a reason to get out of there. It's a little selfish, because while people are rocking back and forth saying, oh, I'm so awful, I'm so horrible, they're not thinking about, what is my family going through? What are my friends? What is my spouse? What are my kids? We're so focused with how awful we are, we forget people are hurting. So all of that being said, the difference comes down to shame or guilt. If you're someone who has been broken and had problems and struggled with issues, and you haven't done this all right, this marriage relationship thing, I give you a pass for doing it imperfectly, and I ask you to give yourself one too. That doesn't mean you're not accountable for the pain you've caused in your adult life. You are. But why you ended up doing those things, you might be able to give yourself a pass for. Maybe it's not because you're a terrible, horrible person. Maybe it's because the lessons you learned on your way to this relationship just weren't very good, and you thought they were okay, and now you realize they're not. The difference between the way to move out of shame is to begin to see yourself as someone who has made mistakes, but they themselves are not a mistake.
I love that. And yeah, I used to, if I did something bad, then I was bad. I would internalize that bad.
Right.
And I had to learn that my behavior, I might not do something, I might go, gosh, that was kind of not the best thing I could have done, but that doesn't make me a bad person. And the other thing is, while it's not an excuse, it is a reason. So the stuff that I did when I was in addiction, like, honestly, I learned to become grateful for it, because while it was shameful, it was all the stuff that got me into recovery, and recovery is such a gift. I'm willing to have had to deal with all that shame and all that junk, because the benefits of the recovery, I didn't have the tools to live life on life's terms before. That's why I had an addiction. I needed my addiction. And now I've been given those tools. So I'll take the stuff that I did. I've made my amends. I worked the stuff. I've done what I needed to do, so that I don't. Now Bosley and Dozer are going at it. So
that's my dog.
I hear Dozer and I hear Bosley. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You can work through this.
Tammy and I live in different states. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So
yeah. Okay. So the next question. My question is methods of tracking myself with following through with things. I'll talk with my wife about doing things, working on my sex addiction issues, and I never seem to follow through with plans. I don't know if there's help for this. It really eats me up when I have to say I haven't gotten something done.
Wow. I'm not sure what to say right there, and I'm usually pretty good.
I have lots to say.
Is this procrastination? Like, okay, Tammy, go for it.
Well, so first thing I thought of is, I wonder if you have a little ADHD, because that would be right in the like, I have good intentions about doing this, and then I forget, So like, if you looked at my desk, there's lists and notes. And so I have I've learned to have, I could put things in my phone with reminders. I do everything I need to do in order to make myself be able to be accountable. And then I get to check things off on my list. Now, this is a biggie deal for me. So when I can check things off, that feels good. And that means I'm not also having to go, I didn't get around to doing X, Y, and Z. So something really practical about, like, just figuring out, and it could be procrastination. Is it something you don't want to do? Is there some resistance? That's a great therapeutic question. But I just wondered if there's something really, like, I don't remember, So thoughts, Dr. Rob?
Well, I'm just going to put it in the chat. Just because I think it's a great thing for people to have. There's a great book for ADD, and Tammy, if this doesn't get through, let me know. It's called You Mean I'm Not Lazy, Stupid, and Crazy? And I have to tell you, about 20 to 25% of people who have compulsive sexual behavior disorder have a co-occurring problem with ADD. And what Tammy's talking about, I'm not saying you have it, I don't know, you should see a doctor, but characteristics of ADD are things like starting something new and getting really excited about it and then not following through. Losing things and being disorganized when you try so hard to be organized. Starting something right in the moment, like dinner or whatever, and then being distracted by someone else and not finishing it. And by the way, if you have these issues, it will drive your spouse crazy. And there are books about how to live with someone with ADD. And just like Tammy said, you know, you learn how to organize your life. You know, like my spouse is ADD, and so he always puts the keys in the same drawer because he knows that if he leaves them on the counter, he'll be everywhere looking for, or, you know, anyway. So there's a rhythm and a way you have to live your life. Anyway, a very good question. I'm not sure if that's your issue, but it's a great thing that we got to talk about.
Yes, I overcooked asparagus for years, and I finally went, you know, if I set a timer for it, because I would just walk away and start going to do something else. So yes.
Okay, Tammy, I have Sensor Cook on my microwave. It automatically cooks the asparagus. I don't have to worry about it.
Well, I can push a timer and that works. So I have known, I've known for years I'm addicted to porn, but I just started with SLAA and learning about love addiction. What's your recommended approach to addressing the love part of this crazy addiction? It's the intrigue I'm overwhelmed with, and that feeds the rest of my addictions with porn and masturbation.
Well, I'm not sure what they mean by intrigue. I know what I would mean by intrigue. I would mean like flirtation and possibility of having sex or something, get something going with someone else. That would be that for me. What are you thinking there?
This is one of those I'm thinking that I would love your clinical impressions on this. So because addressing the love part, if it's love addiction and porn addiction, how do you addressing both of those?
Well, the reason I'm stopping is that I don't know if this person just looks at porn or if they also engage with online prostitution and cam boys and cam girls, or if they have had affairs and seen sex workers. You know, I don't know if the porn is the main issue, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff, or if it's just porn issues, online issues, and idealizing and falling in love with unavailable people. I will say this though, if it is just those, then this is someone who lives in a lot of fantasy, because porn is playing with paper dolls. You're cutting them up, you're moving them around, but they're not real, and you know they're not real. If you're in fantasy relationships, you're not. So, you know, someone who is doing those things is really spends a lot of time in their head. And by the way, I can tell you that as a survivor of abuse and neglect, learning to spend time in my head was a really useful thing, because when people were being crazy around me, I could just read a book or space out and watch something outside, and I could just disappear altogether. But now it's not so good, something to be worked on.
Next question. So my spouse returned from, they went through our treatment program. And
program, yes. What are they going to say?
Well, it says, and to date still struggles anytime I use the word whores, yes, in a derogatory manner. He says it's because he says he now has empathy for them. Could it also be that it resonates with him and where he has been and just serves to remind him of the double life he was leading?
So I'll just say in a general way that if I have clients who are using words like that, words that devalue women in any way and leave them seen as objects, unless someone's talking about being with a sex worker, being at a strip club, and then I just want to hear the story. But those kinds of words speak to me of a lot of rage at women. And I just want you to know that anyone who's been through our program would have gotten a lot of confrontation and pushback on that. Now, some people may not really fully remember or understand why they're not supposed to say that word. They may just think it's your fault or whatever, but I think what I would pay attention to is they're not comfortable with the word, or they think there's something wrong with it. Even if the explanation is wrong, at least they're beginning to get it's not okay to say that. So that's all I think that's all I can.
Well, and I guess I'm wondering why it continues to come up, and so it's coming up in your conversations, and it's being said in a derogatory way. So it feels like there's an impasse, with the two of you around this. And is there a more therapeutic way you can have a conversation that isn't immediately going to put him into a place where he's not going to be able to show up for you? You're not able to have a conversation because this is the pattern. You use that word, he does this, so it doesn't, I'm just wondering, it doesn't feel like that even serves what you're trying to do, other than possibly just trying to, shame him because of the hurt and betrayal. Does that make sense, Dr. Rob?
I think you got it nailed, Tammy.
Okay.
Let's move on.
All right. So how do I rewire my brain from being intensity-based to healthy love-based, whether it's a new interest in a topic or a new connection with a human of the opposite sex? Once the initial excitement dissipates, I don't know how to keep it going because...
Wait. Can you go back a second?
Sure.
Well, there was something about with people, but what was it? Was something else that they lose excitement over?
Whether it's a new interest in a topic or a new connection with it. Yes, topic. Okay. Yes. So it seems like if it's a new activity, new topic, anything, once the initial excitement is over, it's just like, I'm out of here.
Well,
so, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I think, if it's the reason that I stopped you, Tammy, and asked you to go back is because had that word topic not been in there, had it just really been about getting close to people and then running away, there's a lot of trauma issues inside of that. Oftentimes there's a lot of intimacy fears. There's a lot of stuff going on that leaves us, I like the metaphor with a beach ball between the people we're trying to get close to. And there's a beach ball, we try to get closer to them, we push them away, and these are issues that have to do with the past and how they can be worked through in the present. But if you also, but then I want to go back to ADD, because if you start something and don't finish it and are really interested in something and you don't, then that's signs of ADD, and people do so. But let me say something about love, okay, just briefly. If you all don't know the word limerence, L-I-M-E-R-E-N-C-E, what the word means is it's that initial feeling of falling in love, where everybody, see, you spelled it right and I spelled it wrong. Thanks, Tammy, he has an A. It's that feeling of, or you're everything and falling in love, your moonbeams and starlight, it's all the poems, all the country westerns, everything like that. And oftentimes it's the first, 6 months to a year and a half of a relationship, and sometimes that can culminate in people living together. But that isn't love. That is romance. And it's a naturally occurring function that is actually biological, that forms a bond between us and that partner. And that first year or year and a half is actually there so that we can merge with them or become one with them without seeing their faults, without seeing, when you're in love, you overlook the zits, you overlook the farts. You're just not seeing that part because everything about them is wonderful, in case you haven't heard this from a friend who they just fell for somebody endlessly. However, when that part ends, the goal of nature in a relationship is that will, if the relationship is good, is that will form the basis for what starts to be love, because love is about acceptance and knowing the other person. And when they're all moonbeams and starlight, they're really not, that's not really love, that's more fascination. So one of the things that we often struggle with, abuse survivors and addicts, is we are really fearful of intimacy. And so we love the hot, exciting romance part, that's great. But when it actually becomes about just you and me and it's been 2 years, or 4 or 7, I don't want to have sex with you. I'm really not interested in what interests you, because I really love being in love, but I have no idea what adult loving is. I just know how to be fascinated with each other. And some people will say, oh, I'm not in love with them anymore because I don't have all those feelings. No, that's when you actually are beginning to form the foundation of what love might become. And by the way, when you're really young, probably under 27, you don't know this. You're just, everybody's wonderful and everybody's great. And you want to say, or whatever you want. And this is often how relationships form early, is you're too stupid to know anything and you just get involved with them. And then you form around each other. This is why dating sucks in your 30s, because you know who you are and you just, anyway, I'm going off. Please continue, Tammy.
That was a great answer. Okay.
Maybe another question.
So Dr. Well, it says Dr. Weiss. How do you avoid complacency in long-term recovery when you've been sober from inner or middle circle activities for more than a year and feel like, I got this?
Would you so I think that you have a perspective, Tammy, about folks who get complacent. What do you think about that?
For me, it's an ongoing journey, and there's always more to learn. And just because I'm not acting out in those behaviors doesn't mean I got this. And I've been around long enough to see a whole bunch of people relapse, and it sucks. And I hate to see that. The other thing is I'm always learning more about me and my actions and reactions. So if I'm continuing to move forward on the journey, then I'm not sliding back. So, so I continue to be actively engaged in recovery and paying attention. The other thing, I never say I'm a recovered addict. I refuse to use that language because that feels like I got this. And so I'm always saying I'm in the process. I'm a recovering addict. So I keep that mindset, which helps me stay on track to continue my recovery journey.
Well said, Tammy. I guess I don't understand what the word "this" is. I've got this.
I got this recovery thing. Go ahead.
Right, but does that mean, hold on. Does that mean I've got it, like I no longer want to have sex or look at porn, or like the addiction piece, like I no longer feel that? Because getting this is what Tammy was talking about. It is a lifelong journey. If you are having these kinds of problems in your adult life, this sexual acting out, it is the symptom of all the intimacy and relationship problems that lie beneath. And you will find that out when you think you got this licked, and then you want to have an intimate relationship because you won't have a clue, or you'll end up going back to acting out because the intimacy terrifies you, or you get really involved with them and you have this great love affair, and then you have a baby and it terrifies you. In other words, I think that there's a little prematurity here. And I'm sorry, a narrow vision. What this is like, oh, I'm not masturbating to porn anymore. I'm not seeing prostitutes. I got this licked. I'm thinking this is, how can I be a more loving person? How can I be? The first thing that came to me when you were talking, Tammy, was, what are you doing for other people? When I get bored with, oh, I haven't learned enough, or maybe I'm there, I think, well, maybe I'm not doing enough for others. If you've got it going on, will you go to some meetings and tell people, I'm ready to sponsor people? And then, because that's the next stage of your growth, is passing it on. And then, by the way, you'll see what's missing, because as you have to teach it to someone else, you'll see where you're falling through. I just want you to know that most people I've known in AA for 25, 30 years, they are continuously grateful for the new things they're learning every day.
Amen. Yep.
So anyway.
And with all due respect, and this, I celebrate your recovery.
Forget the respect. It's okay.
No. I celebrate the recovery. Every 24 hours is awesome. However, when you say long-term recovery and it's a year, come see me in 2 or 3 more years and we'll continue to talk. So like, not dismissing what you've done, but there's more to learn. So
wait, before I will answer the last question, I promise, but I just want to say a couple of things and do a little bit of promotion.
Well, I'm going to show you while you're talking, I'm going to show the,
are you going to send the podcast cover?
I have it up on my screen.
So let me say, I have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction, and it's been really, really helpful and successful. And Tammy and I decided, you know what, maybe people seem to really get something from these conversations we have. And so we are editing them down and creating a whole series online called Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction with Dr. Rob and Tammy. I love the cover. Tammy, maybe not so much, but
I like it a lot better now. I don't look good in brown, and I was in a brown box. So she took out the brown box, and I'm good now.
I'm so glad. So
yeah.
What I wanted to say is I have a pretty popular podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And I mean, it's not a vanity podcast. They get about 10,000 downloads. We're on getting on 400,000. So I'm very excited about that. And all we do here on the podcast, I have a blog. I've been blogging for Psychology Today for 8 years. You can read me endlessly for free if you like. All of my work is on Amazon. The books I've written about families and partners and healing from sex addiction. There's workbooks for addicts, all that stuff. And finally, I got to thank you, Tammy, because I wouldn't be able to work with you if it wasn't for Seeking Integrity and the treatment center that we run. But we have a lot of fun, and I'm so grateful for what we get to do there.
I am so grateful, because when the alum are constantly saying life-changing, and I share this, I've had partners and spouses that have contacted me and have said it was life-changing for them, which means that the guys have learned and have taken it back to their real lives, and their loved ones can see it. Now, it's not a miracle cure. It isn't like
And it's
14
not
days and you're fixed.
everybody. And it's
No,
not
no,
everybody.
no. If you choose to go home and not use any of the things you've learned,
I've seen that too.
Yes, unfortunately.
Let's do one more question.
We're excited about the new podcast.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
You can find, well, on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, there are lots of therapists doing this work for free, just like this. You can drop into other groups. And you can also find me if you didn't get your question answered, or you can write me at rob@seekingintegrity.com. You can write Tammy at seekingintegrity.com. We will refer you therapists. We'll find you workshops. We pretty much know who's around, is doing good work. Glad to help. And we don't get kickbacks, by the way. And the other thing was,
in the rooms, and you were going to talk about
right on Friday
recovery summit.
Do you read minds? Oh no, I know. You're a wife. You're the person who remembers where things are. Where are my keys? Where am I? Yeah, on In the Rooms. If you have more questions, intherooms.com. I'll be there Friday. And did you know, Tammy, last Friday at 6 o'clock California time, I had 290 people in that room.
Wow.
That was crazy. People are home. They want to get information. They want to learn.
Well,
it's great. We can give it away for free.
The Super Saturday Recovery Summit a couple weeks ago, and we have the next one planned for May 16th.
And we had 1,000 people.
It was
anyway,
awesome.
Let's answer questions.
Anyway, we have one more question, and then we'll then you can go eat your dinner. And to all of you that we aren't going to get to ask, I'm sorry, but come back.
Yeah, and write us.
Yes, I have a question about relapse. My sex addict husband, a victim of covert and overt incest, was in recovery for 8 years in SA groups. He was remorseful, in clarity, and said that his sponsor and I saved his life. Fast forward 8 years later, he stopped going to groups, and now he says he is not an addict and it's all my fault. He says that I have ruined his life with the SA groups, and it's like Stockholm syndrome. We have been separated since January with little contact. He is very upset with me for ruining his life. I did see that he joined the Tinder and Be Naughty hit on my mother's housekeeper in October. Do you think his 180-degree turnaround is due to a relapse? He did have amygdala taken out due to seizures.
Okay,
that's a complicated one. So do you think he's relapsed?
No, I did. You know, when something starts that someone has really been able to stabilize, and it would be and then there. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Your husband could have started to do drugs. He might have a new woman in his life or man. I have no idea. But I will say that the first thing that came to my mind was Parkinson's, because the medications L-Dopa, which is one of the things they give for Parkinson's, which affects the amygdala, many of those men become or women become hypersexual. And I've had people come as sex addicts to treatment and they actually were on Parkinson's meds, and that was what was driving their inability to contain their behavior. If someone has had surgery on their brain, especially like that part of the brain, it's not unlikely that they might be struggling with impulsivity or anger but the thing is, you can only lead a horse to water. I guess if it were me, I might go talk to my ex-husband's or my husband's surgeon. And I would go say, hey, I'm seeing these symptoms. What do you think? He's oppositional. He seems to have slid backwards. He's being impulsive. We even can't live together. I mean, I might go to one of those docs and say, what's going on? Do you think this might be neurological or organic? Because it doesn't sound right to me. Or do you either?
Yeah, no. So we are out of time.
Thanks, everybody.
And I'm sorry because there's lots more questions. I wish we could answer them. But
Tammy, we're everywhere. Blogs, podcasts, you can find us.
We'll be back. Join.
Okay. Have a good evening, folks. Stay safe. Bye for now.